In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take your models directly from CAD and get them into BRIO VR for AR, VR, and real-time rendering. So first, I'm going to start off in the CAD software. In this case, I'm going to use Moi. So here we are in Moi. You can see the CAD surface that I've created, just a sample here. And the first thing to notice is I've created two areas for decals. These are just surfaces that are offset from the solid model. So if we go ahead and look in the right view, you can see there's a small offset from the body of the model. And that's really important to make sure you have that offset if you're creating decals. If the surfaces are not offset, the texture will be fighting with the texture that's on the main body, and we don't want that. So the next step is to select your mesh and then file export that mesh from your CAD software. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and export. I'll just show you what that looks like. So my mesh came out to be this sort of a resolution. Just make sure you're not wasting lots and lots of polygons on these fillets. And my total polygon count export was at 6,000 polys. When you're rendering for AR and VR, you need to make sure, or need to think about your target device. If you're just doing these for a visualization on PC, you don't need to worry about polygon counts in BRIO because you're going to be rendering on a high-end graphics card. But for augmented reality in particular, you're going to be going towards a mobile phone on either iOS or an Android. And for those experiences, they recommend polygon counts under 100,000 polys. Now, the fewer polys, the better the experience is going to be for the end user. So just keep that in mind. So to manage your polygons, we're going to actually go into Blender. Now, I'm going to show you how I got this model into Blender. We're just going to start from a clean scene. And this is Blender here. If you haven't used it before, it can take a while to get used to it, but I'm going to show you exactly what you need to get your models from CAD into AR and real-time rendering. So with the Blender open, just press the middle mouse button and drag, and that's going to rotate your scene. Middle mouse button and shift is going to allow you to pan around. And then the mouse wheel forward and back is going to allow you to zoom in and out of the scene. So that's how you get around. With objects, with click and drag with the left mouse button, you can select objects and then press the period key on the number pad to actually frame in and frame that object on the screen. So that's going to be really handy for what you're going to be doing here. We're going to start off in File, Import our OBJ file. Just go ahead in, and I'm just going to grab the OBJ, select Import. And it's going to come in, actually, let me delete that actually. I'm going to get the original one just so we can see, make sure we have the original files. There we go. The original, so there it is. And you may notice that it could be huge depending on which scale you exported from CAD. So to scale the object down, press the S key, just tap S, and it's going to enter into this mode. You're going to see your cursor, if you move left and right, it'll scale it up and down. So we're just going to scale it down to something that's a reasonable size. In this case, we're not too concerned about the scale. You can select the cube and then delete that cube. That's a default cube. And you notice that there's these little tiny lines in my case, and this is just to illustrate what can happen to you. So I'm just illustrate how you can get out of these situations. So these lines here indicate that the decal surface is intersecting with the body, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that this surface is just proud of the body here. It's just standing offset just a little bit. So if you select your this decal surface and press the G key and move around, you can see that it moves in the screen space by default in Blender. After you've pressed G, you need to press the Z key to move up and down. So you can move it just so it's just offset just a little bit. So this I've still got some left over, so I'm G and Z again. Just poke it out just a little bit. There we go. So now we've got a nice clean setup there. This one doesn't seem to have anything intersecting, so it's fine. So next step, we're going to assign some materials just so we can look at how our graphics, preview how our graphics are going to look on these objects. And then we're going to go in and do some UVs for these objects. So we're going to head over to the shading tab. I'm going to press the period key to frame in on this object here. And on the right hand side, there's this long list of tools. We don't need to worry about all of them. Just press this little ball at the bottom right, and that's going to bring up the materials section. So we're going to go to the right further and press the plus sign to set up a new material description. Press new, and you're going to notice on the bottom node view here, you're going to have this list of channels, and those are channels in your material. If you just middle mouse and scroll back, you'll be able to scroll out and see that it's principal BSDF. That just means it's the default material in Blender. So now we've created material, but we've got to assign it. And in Blender, you have to assign to the faces of the material. So we can select in the top left here, top left corner, you can select this menu and go to edit mode. And that's going to enter into this polygon face selection mode. The faces should now be highlighted in this orange corner color. And then back into the right, just press assign. And to make sure that it's properly assigned, you can change the base color to something else. You know, we can change it to pink in this case. All right, so that's going to verify that that's been assigned properly to those faces. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to add, we're going to go add, and we're going to add in a texture to bring in our texture maps for our decal. And this is just, again, for us to preview if the surface UV coordinates are correct for this object. What UVs are just a 2D representation of the 3D object, just unwrapped. That's what those are. And they define where the texture is going to show up on the object. So we're going to drag from the color node here on this image texture and then drag that to base color. And now it's going to be black because we don't have a texture loaded. So we're going to press on open. We're going to browse back to our directory, and I'm just going to select the texture map and press apply. And you can see what happens here is that, hey, these textures are flipped. It's not correct. So in order to resolve that, we have to go and fix our UVs. So we're going to go over to the UV editing tab, and by default, MOI will export UVs for you to use. Press period on the right hand side here, and up at the top right, we can click on the second material ball, and that's going to allow us to preview the texture while we're in this UV mode. But we need to adjust these UVs so that the texture is facing the correct direction. So on the left here, you can drag a box around these points. And we're just going to press the S key, and that allows us to scale. And you can see as I drag left and right and adjust the UVs, the texture on the right adjusts its ratio to the model based on our UV map. So we don't want to change the size. We actually want to invert this. So with S selected, we can press the X key, and that's going to constrain the scaling to be in just in the X direction. So we're going to scale it and move to left until it inverts itself. And you can see now that actually flips the UVs so that it's in the correct orientation, right? And that's really all there is to actually assigning or adjusting your UVs to fit. Now, what happens if you didn't have any UVs at all? So I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to select the object, and with the object selected and back in object mode, so this menu here says object mode, click on this little triangular icon here, and then I'm going to select UV maps. I'm just going to delete my UV maps. So now I don't have any UVs at all. So what if nothing had UVs? So we're just going to tab back over to object mode. Make sure you're in object mode. Select your object, and just in the UV in this triangle here, I'm going to press delete just to simulate what happens if you had no UVs, because you could be coming from a software that doesn't export UVs with your objects. So select your object again. We're going to go back over into edit mode and make sure it says edit mode here. Select one of the faces. Just select a face and press Control L to make sure you have all of the faces, the linked faces, selected. You can also press select here and then select linked. That will select all the faces for that object as well. With all the faces selected, you can press UV and then Smart Project. Press OK, and that's going to create UVs for our decal surface again. Here we're going to select the UVs, and then we're going to press the R key, in this case to rotate. Press Shift with R held down, or Control, sorry, Control, and that's going to allow you to snap in 5-degree increments. And then press the G key to move. And then you'll be able to adjust the graphics so that they fit nicely onto that object. So in this way, you can create UVs for any of your decal surfaces and adjust the UVs so that they fit the textures properly. So I'm going to go around and add UVs to the rest of my objects, selecting each object, hitting the Tab key, going to UV, and then Smart UV Project. Just press OK, and then select the next object, Edit Mode, Smart UV Project, press OK, and we'll just go to our last object, go in Edit Mode, Smart UV Project, press OK, and our last decal, we're going to go to UVs and Smart UV Project again. Press OK. Now you can notice that the UVs for this are actually vertical, so we're going to want to rotate these again. So you can head over to the shading tab, and once again we're going to do, with that object selected, we're going to go over to the small ball here at the bottom here to get to your material properties. We're going to create a new material description slot, add a material to that slot, pressing New. And then we're going to go in our top left menu here, go back to Edit Mode, and back over to the right, press Assign to assign that material. You can change the color just to make sure it's been assigned correctly. Add a texture, image texture, and base color. And this is again just to check and make sure that the UVs are aligned properly. So we're going to go back, add our logo, and you can see that it's actually inverted, or it's rotated the incorrect orientation, and that's again based on our UVs. So we're going to go back over to our UV tab, and you can see here the UVs. We're going to go rotate, press R, and start rotating those, and you can see that it's been rotated correctly, but it's also scaled or flipped in the wrong direction. So press S, X. We're going to invert this way, and then we're going to press X, S, and then Y to invert the other way. There we go. Now we're just going to move those, press G, and then move it. I'm going to just change the proportion of these a bit, so S, and make sure it's the right proportion of the text, and then G, move, S to scale. So yeah, so that looks about right in terms of the size of that graphic on that particular decal surface. And the reason why we're using this method of editing the UVs for these decals is that the augmented reality renders engines that are on the iOS and Android device don't use the decal systems that may be in Blender or Keyshot or wherever you're coming from. Those are custom decal engines that don't work in augmented reality, right? So you need to make sure that the surface UVs on your decals are correct. And so now we've got some good UVs. If we go through and check each of our objects, the UVs are going to be good on each one of these. So at this point, we need to go back to the Layout tab, and we can just select all of our objects, drag a big box around everything, and File, and then export this object as an OBJ. We're just gonna give it the same name, and go ahead and press export. And we're ready to import these into BRIO at this point. So we're going to tag back over to BRIO and press the cloud icon, And we're going to bring in our OBJ file. You can see it come right in. And at this point, it takes a bit of time to process because we're converting the models into a format that's very friendly for augmented reality and virtual reality. So there's a bit of pre-processing time, and then press the start key to confirm the import. Now in BRIO, you're going to be using the right mouse button to pan around, left mouse button to rotate around the scene, and the middle mouse button to scroll in and out. This camera icon here represents the view that your audience is going to have for this model. So wherever that camera is, you can notice the preview of it showing up down here in the right. You can make this preview window as large or small as you want. This dotted line is the orbit path for the camera, and that's an option you can turn on and off for the camera properties on the right hand side of the interface. So in our case, we're going to select our object and we want to scale it down into view. On the left panel, you can press the scale icon over here and just click and drag with the left mouse button to make it much smaller. We can then select our camera and then click on this little white polygon here to pan around the camera on one plane. And you can see the initial viewing angle changing down here. And next we're going to go in and add some materials. So we're going to go to our library, and just in the BRIO materials library, you'll need to expand this library so you can access all of these materials. And we'll just select the object, and just notice that when you have an object that has multiple groups, or a group and multiple objects, on the left hand side in the object list, you can see when you initially click the object, it selects the parent node, and you need to select again to select the child within the parent. So that's just something in BRIO that is unique and a convenience for you. So again, back to our object, we've got it selected, and we're going to make sure that I'm going to go down and select a plastic material. So just click the plastic material with the left mouse button, and you can see that's been selected, and it looks pretty nice. It's got some texture and things like that in there. If we select the bottom cylinder object, we're going to assign this anisotropic brushed material, and with that active, we can go in and change the mode to triplanar to get a decent look in this case, and have all the brush direction going in the right way. And then we can select our decal on this metal body here and press the upload button, and we're going to go ahead and select our texture. There we go, that's uploaded. For the texture, you want to make sure that the metalness is turned down, and the roughness, you can adjust the roughness. So if we want a very shiny decal, we can have it very shiny, or if you want a very matte finish, you can have it increase the roughness so it's a more matte finish. So that decal on that surface is working. So we'll go up to the next complex surface here. So up on top, we're going to select that object here. In the material tab on the right, we're going to select diffuse. I'm going to go to select the graphics. And for this decal, we added, it's a PNG, and we added an alpha channel. You can see that that's how you would create graphics that sort of allow you to reveal the texture from behind those graphics. So those graphics are assigned. Again, I'm going to turn down the metalness, and we'll turn the roughness up on this one. And we'll just, for the remaining objects, we'll assign just a metal shader to it. And that's really it for how you would create this your materials and get them ready for real-time viewing. You can just press the preview button at the bottom, and we've got an instant turntable that you can use. And then when we press export, and we're going to go ahead and publish this. Publishing the scene will generate a link for you, and that link will give you access to this presentation. So you can publish that link on any social media. You can embed it on your website, or you can just use it for internal design reviews by passing it around, for example, in a calendar invite. And everyone who receives the link will be able to view this asset securely. So you can see the presentation is ready and it's working. So thanks. That's all. That's the overview of how to export from CAD and set up your decal surfaces, and then your materials in BRIO, and then publish for export. Thanks.